So Dr. Sandeep now. Dr. Sandeep will be presenting on archiving ourselves, a new SUTD database for historical research. He'll share how he has co-worked and co-created knowledge database with students over several years, actually. Dr. Sandeep comes from, is a senior lecturer with Haas and has worked with visual archives for several decades on projects at the Smithsonian, Harvard University, Film Museum in the Netherlands, and he has done several documentaries, written books, and so on. So without much ado, let me pass on the time to Dr. Sandeep. It's a pleasure to have everyone. Yes, thanks, Sandeep. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Nacha. Glad to fill in here. So what I will be presenting today is a way in which a group of people from the SUTD community found a solution to a pedagogic problem we were having in the classroom. Now, the class that I refer to is a history class, which is, we do have a robust Haas department. We do teach history and other of the social sciences, but this is an example of how we collaborated with some of our very bright ISTD students. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. So the first half of the presentation, I'll keep it short, is going to be what the class is about, and then I'll set up what the problem that we were facing, and then I'll go into what they designed, and I'll actually demo the product, so to speak. So it's a history course on the Japanese occupation of Southeast Asia. We've offered it every year for the last 4 years. I've taught it in other universities before that. It's a survey course of what happened during World War II in the Pacific Theater. We don't study China so much in the run-up to the war, but of course that context is given as the context of what was happening in Europe at the time. Okay, so what have been our approaches in this very traditional subject? Journal articles, no one's surprised, excerpts from monographs, films, newsreel footage is different from fiction films, excerpts from fictional writing sometimes, guest lectures, which Zoom has helped us with, and we have student activities going on too. Now, just a quick reference to the Zoom lectures. We've had a variety of people, historian, someone who actually fought in World War II, and I'll come to that in a moment, and a filmmaker who made a film about remembering the Japanese occupation. Now, here are a palette of the books we study. We've looked at graphic novels, we've looked at some of the classics, we've looked at primary source text, transcripts of interviews. So it's a mixture of very classic textbooks and some more interesting modern re-engagement with the Second World War. And the films, again, I'm just giving you a show here of the different ones that we've used, classics like a P. Ramlee film, Japanese films like the Burmese Harp, propaganda films made by the Japanese, films about the issues of comfort women, and a Hollywood blockbuster like Bridge on the River Kwai. Some of you would be familiar with these films. So, but the other thing that we do is we go on field trips, because you can do that in Singapore. We couldn't do that over the pandemic, of course. That was a blow to us. A visit to the former Ford factory. We have our students over there. If you haven't been there, I would encourage you to go there. The Kranji War Memorial, where you stand at the gravesite of many who died during the war. And then we will be going to the new exhibition at Bukit Chandu, right? These are popular. Now, Singapore, of course, is rife with the physical memory of the war. We have a station named after Tan Kaki, who was, played a pivotal role in the opposition against the Japanese. It comes up in our currency. It comes up in the lectures that we listen to. It's around us. It's not something that's outside of where we live, because we're barely 2 generations removed from it. So, what are some of the resources that we have for students to write about this? This is now slowly, I'm bringing us to the problem that we faced. So while the semester is going on, they write response papers based on their readings for the week or their field trips. But towards the end of the semester, they have to write a short research paper. So in the freshman year, they are prepped to understand how citation work, how referencing works. The Writing Center in the past few years has done a beautiful job in helping students kind of coming out of high schools where they may not have been conversant in the systems of citation. We give them great online access through our library portal. We have national archives which are accessible for anyone, and the students themselves sometimes do eyewitness reports, or we bring in a lecturer. So here's a survivor. I mean, here's an example of the kind of thing you can find in the National Archives, where you actually have oral history interviews. And sometimes our students will take some of these interviews from the National Archives, and then they will do some on their own based on people that they find in their own families, and sort of do a comparative study of it. Here we have students on the left who have done personal interviews. One visiting student who couldn't come due to the pandemic but was in Japan actually had a grandfather who was in the army there, and she did a long sort of primary source interview with him. Another student talked to other students, and we had a 95-year-old American war veteran who fought in the Pacific War, who Zoomed from his house in Alaska, and the students just loved it because nothing replaces, you know, a living human being who participated in what we were studying at the time. He died just about 2 weeks ago, and this might have been the last university lecture or presentation he gave to our students. They were very grateful. They wrote him a letter thanking him. Okay, and this is just a combination of the slides from the Japanese war veteran who one of our students who was an exchange student interviewed for this. So we are collecting these materials as an institution. Our students, even though history is not their primary focus of study because they happen to take that class with me, are now generating sources. We have institutional records, we have institutional memories, right? What do we do with these things? Students in coming years will look for these things. Now, what are some of the challenges we have to our research? In most universities, electives, you know, can be built on one another because you would probably be majoring in history, and you would take a 101 class, and then you would move on to a more specialized class. You might move on to a methods class in your final year to write your thesis, your undergraduate thesis. But here we have to think about the students taking an elective as a one-time thing. They may never take another history class, right? So it has to be kind of carefully built or structured that it gives them enough immersion. Our stacks are limited. We know that. Our model for our library is different. But so are the stacks in many places now because we moved away from that type of learning. And of course, we don't have an area specialist librarian. It's not the way in which our library works. Certainly a humanities subject wouldn't have a specialist in Southeast Asian studies, as you might find in NUS or somewhere. So these were some of the challenges that I wanted the students to overcome. But this isn't just one of our challenge at SUTD. The Atlantic had an article of where books in libraries aren't really working out. Students go to the e-links to the books more than they do pick up the actual books. They're going into storage. Here's Yale University telling us about the drop. It's very clear in checking out physical books and articles and so forth, right? And this is made up with their online access. So they're not getting less, they're just getting it from a different place. Now, when we study history at SUTD, at least in my class, one of the requirements, like I said, was writing the final paper. And with that comes the responsibility of writing a good bibliography. Now, this is something you come to university to learn. You don't necessarily know this in high school. Sometimes their bibliographies are weak. The students don't know how to do it. They just list the books. And I say, no, you need to redo it. You need to do the right format. This isn't graded. I mean, I have a grade in there, but it's more like I give them a first chance and then I grade it, right? So, and some other students just put the links. They slap the links together and they think that's a bibliography. But then once they're done with the process, they really, you know, do a fantastic job. That would put my bibliography to shame because they now know how to research in a library. They're no longer going to a newspaper. They're no longer Googling the things, they're doing it through our library portal. And they're writing on different subjects, and they're writing this watertight bibliographies. Now, so we compiled a lot of the student data from the past 4 years, and I'll come back to that in a minute. That's part 2. But quickly, what are some of the things that we found? So we looked at all the keywords, and obviously Japanese and occupation will come up first. Word clouds tell us some things, but then you zoom in at a certain level, that the bigger, more obvious words drop out. They write about food, they write about the military, they write about the internment, Changi, they write about prison suicides, they write about the Pacific War, they write about resistance, right? And if you go in even closer, you realize that specific things that you teach in class are picked up by students. That's where they're writing about Bahau, because I grew up there, and I told them about that. I told them how that was, in my parents' time, a post-World War II town, and the dynamics of that. They look at, very specific things that you realize that were picked up from your lecture. And so, it gives you a good mapping of in the end, when the students have to write their own paper, they actually come back to what they've learned in class. These are the phrases I used in class, and then they pop up too. People write specifically about colonial influence, about the Japanese sentiment, about independence movement, about prisoners of war, about internment camps. These themes pop up in their papers. And if you look at where the sources come from, these are all from their online research, let's say. Very few would have physically picked out books, although some have. It sort of falls in line with sort of international trends. Surprisingly, books are still big, even though they're looking at the e-version of the book, but they're looking at book. They're not just looking at journal articles, which has picked up since online learning has started, but it hasn't replaced books. They're at par. Other things like videos have come in, right, which perhaps wasn't so prevalent a decade or two ago. We look at the bibliography according to the year published. Makes sense. You read the more recent research or the more recent editions when you make your arguments, when you make your case. It goes up. Mysteriously, in the 1970s, there's a dip. I can't explain this. If someone can, I would really like to know. So here's a smattering of the different types of papers students have written. They're very diverse. Some have taken a quantitative study approach mixed in with qualitative, right? So a popularity of comfort women movements in Singapore compared to Indonesia. Questions asked about that. Good questions. Others have done those interviews that I talked about. This one student actually wanted to understand how Singaporeans studied the Second World War. Where did they get their impression from? Was it in school? Was it word of mouth? Was it from television? So he went ahead and did that. Another student did something completely different, more comparing poetry in Asia, expressions towards the war from different standpoints, right? Now, so what I want to go to next is a actual demonstration of what we did in the class, and you can use that QR code, or I'll put this in the chat in a second. Let me just put that in there in case someone wants to actually click on that. Okay, all right. So the problem, and this is the problem and solution part, our students faced was that every year at the end of the term or every term, they would come to me and say, Prof, do you know about this? Do you know about that? Where do I find a source for this? And we're talking, 60 students a semester sometimes, more sometimes. And how do I give them references for all these different things that they're interested in? So I thought, well, what about the 4 years of final student papers and those bibliographies they so painstakingly made? What if we feed those into some kind of a database? Now, my idea ran out there. I thought, well, we'll have an Excel spreadsheet, which is how it began. And this is the beautiful thing about SUTD is you tell our students that you want something interesting and technological, and they will run with it. So this database was started by another student, Yu Xiang, and then two ISTD students, Ragul Balaji and Jing Yi, came in and they said, we want to take this thing over. So they started creating this other system where they started entering the information, making it more interesting. What are the unique types of sources? What are the unique keywords, right? I mean, we're just at A, it's got aircraft, aggression, administration, activism, goes on and on. So they started running those things into the database. And then they took all those bibliographies from every year, okay, 4 years in the past, and they fed them into a system. I'm not going to pretend to understand what that means in the lower half of the section of the screen right here. Okay, now let's take a quick look at just a basic way in which this was done. So here we have, so let's say you have Singapore, you have women. Obviously, you look at the intersection, you enter it at the same time, and you find sort of an intersectional set for Singapore and women. Now try doing a ranked set intersection over something of this scale, and you find very, very interesting results, because you're not just interested in one theme, you're interested in nutrition in a certain part of the world at a certain time within Southeast Asia, and that's where the ranked intersection comes in. Now, I would like at this point to click out really quickly and go to the actual website, okay? So here we are, I'm sharing the website. This is what the website looks like. It starts off with the bibliographic page, which I will come to, primary sources, which archives what we've done. This is archiving ourselves. Some student publications, yes, we have published. The guest lectures that come up, the local archives that are our sources here in Singapore. There's a lot of this. And of course, if anyone wants, there's the whole course syllabus down here. Now, let me go down to the bibliographic section and look at it for a moment with you. So let's say we want to look at comfort women as a topic of writing a final paper. And we hit that, right? We have 85 results. But they're just not hits. They actually link to the source. So the first one is a journal article. If you click on it, we come to the journal. This is accessible through our library, so we will be able to click on it and find the article really easily. If we look at, let's say, someone's thesis, okay? You click on that and it comes up on Scholar Bank, okay? This is someone's thesis written in another university. If we want to look at a report, International Workshop Japan and the Comfort Women, and it actually brings you up to an academia.edu page. So I can go on, you can imagine what this is like, right? There are books in there, obviously. Let's see if something interesting like a video comes up. Okay, here's a video of someone who dressed as a boy for years to avoid becoming a comfort woman. So the internet has these sources, and in the past our own students have gone through it and mined it and written their precious final papers and given us these bibliographies. So my point was, why not we use this to help students in the future, because they might be looking for something and I might not know it off the top of my head, and they have access to this. We're also sharing this with other universities, and the faculty, Sayaka Chatani, who teaches does Japan studies in the history department at NUS, has this on her website for her own students. We would be sending this out to other people because I think it would be useful. Now, I'm going to show one thing which is my little show-off moment, and unfortunately Ragul and Jingi are not here because they're good SUTD students. They're in class right now, so I have their blessing in showing you their part of the work, which is this website and the plans that we made together. But you hit show all bibliographies and look at that. 3,899 keywords, 1,027 sources just on the Japanese occupation of Southeast Asia. I'm going to dare say that there's no other resource like this anywhere. It's not complete. It will be completed, or not completed. It will be improved upon by our own students, because we'll leave this as an open source system that people can come in and work on and add to over the years. So this was our sort of example of design and technology helping out a history class, something as traditional as a history class. Now, just in summary, a couple of final things. I would not be honest if I didn't say, if I didn't register a little bit of protest Earlier this morning, there was a slide of statistics up by a study from Ernst and Young. And they said that of the methods that Gen Z or Gen Z students prefer, uh, lecturing and field trips was the last. It was number 10, and that students didn't like that. Now, that's a survey that was taken. I think lecturing can be very dynamic. I don't think we should discount lecturing. I don't know how you would teach history without discussions and without lecturing. And if you took a field trip and you went to a graveyard where your ancestors' flesh and bone were in front of you, I don't think anyone would find that boring. The bus never has an empty seat. The class never has an empty seat. So there are different ways of learning different disciplines, perhaps. There was also another statistic up there that said that these students didn't like traditional subjects, that they want the subjects that were futuristic and future-based. Of course, we understand that, and the methodologies that come with teaching them, a lot of them that we've been looking at today. However, as a university, we have to take student feedback in what they prefer and what they like. But it is also our job as teachers to teach them things that are important part of a college education. And I think reading comprehension, writing papers, being able to cite are important. It is irrelevant whether you use this in a history paper or for something that you will design in the future, something that your startup company will propose for. You will have to do those things. And those things come out of very traditional disciplines, so we can't overlook that. Okay. I'm done with our part of the presentation. I wish Ragul and Jingi were here because they really take the credit for this. Like I said, it's a beautiful environment we have where I've learned from them, and they've really helped out a pedagogic solution here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Very impressive, Sandeep. It's a lot of work and a lot of creative ideas as well. And it's very interesting to see blended learning is not just about the teachers designing materials for students, but it is co-working with the students and getting them to also collaborate and prepare learning materials for the future learners. You know, it's really a social mission in that sense. Very apt for SUTD's mission. Any questions for Sandeep? Our audience are very quiet. They don't want to ask any questions the whole day. Either every presentation is, guys, you're all there or not there. But they answer in the QR codes. Any thoughts to share?
Well, you have the website. Take it for a spin, click around. You might find some interesting things in there.
Yep. Yeah. We will definitely keep in touch with you on this very interesting idea, very new and innovative. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Naja, I have a question. Naja.
Yeah, sure. Yes. Who is this, please?
This is Subharaj speaking. Hi, Sandeep. This is an interesting work, really good. So can I have a question that have you seen any improvement in the writing or like the way the students, the knowledge increase, kind of like what is the quality of the report or quality of the things after using this site? Have you seen any?
So Raj, good question. I don't know because we've just finished this. So it's new. We'll implement it next term and I'll see how this works. Some people have pointed out that it could lead the students to be a little lazy because they'll just go here rather than kind of go out looking for their own. But I don't know yet. And I'm certainly curious to see what happens.
Okay. And the follow-up question is that, okay, so are you allowing the students to add the reference to the database or like add any interesting material they come across, or otherwise everything you will be the one who will be doing the legwork?
No. So the way in this initial approach to it, 2 students took on the responsibility really of 3 students of doing the whole thing, right? Which is they went through everyone's work. What I'm hoping in future years is that 1 student might take this on as their final project, as a bibliographic project, and they would be adding on this material to the database. I don't have anything that I want to censor out of the database. As long as it's part of the final paper, as long as it was thought to be relevant, unless it's flagged for some reason, it should certainly be added on. And the students should be able to do it themselves.
Thank you. It's a good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thanks, Sandeep. And it's not easy to fill in 2 days with so many slides and so much of good information. So thanks again.
You're
for that.
welcome.